I have vowed that I will not try to teach you Scrum or XP or convince you of anything that you don't already know. So, how's my sound up there in the back? Is this loud or is this okay? It's good? Okay. Well, then, let's talk about taking back Agile. This all started because I was foolhardy enough to write a blog post. Sometimes we say things because we mean them, not because we have a plan for the future. And if you look, there's a little bit of text at the bottom. And I definitely believe in this. There is no reason that we should be cranking out horrible software between pointless meetings. I think that was never what the original Agilists had in mind. And I know because I was there. In comp.object, Kent Beck and the others started talking about this crazy idea they had for how they do software. And they decided they would call that extreme programming. And when they said, hey, we have this crazy idea, we write the tests and the code at the same time, all over the board, people threw a fit. It was the most ridiculous and stupid thing they'd ever heard. And they have meetings and plan every week, only a week at a time. What maniacs! This could never possibly work. So they were met with a lot of resistance, but they came up with a system that was quite beautiful, and years later I joined in doing XP type work, and I've always enjoyed that. I thought it was a beautiful thing. So let's talk about what it means to take Agile back. The main thing I think is after I put up my blog post and people asked me what is the answer, I realized I didn't have an answer. And I didn't really want an answer. What I really wanted was some really good questions, because I believe in how profound questions can be and how much they can change the world. This week you've seen questions around estimating and around value and so many other practices. I think that's the thing we want the most. So if we're to take back Agile, what we'd want to do is take back the wonder of it and the curiosity and the profound questions it asked. There are a lot of different questions. Now, I could ask, who's the idiot who wrote this code? And that's not a very profound question. Or, what the hell were you thinking? Which is also not a very profound question. I found that all of the profound questions are about the work or about us together. All the questions I ask about other people tend to be weak or flat or harmful. How did you solve this problem? Okay, that's not so bad. How can we solve that problem? So much more powerful. The most important question of all I've learned from a man named Christopher Avery. He taught me to ask this question. What do you want? The most important question probably in all of human history. You know, I've been working in this team and we've been doing all this estimating and we've been trying to get our releases done and get code out the door. It's just so hard. Okay. What do you want? Well, I want to not do it anymore. Well, that's not going to work. So what do you want? Well, I just want it to not suck. Well, that's where Agile started. So if we're going to take Agile back, we should take it back to some original questions. Right? Now, it's easy to be negative with our questions, but that's not very helpful. Take back Agile. They said, well, who are you going to take it back from? And I said, well, I don't hate anybody. You know, well, who took it away from you? Well, it just didn't get taken away. It just sort of started disappearing in funny ways. So we've come up with this. This is from Woody Zuhl, and the illustration is by his wonderful wife, Andrea. And he said the idea is to work so that we can get from where we are to where we want to be, to make things wonderful, not just to avoid suckage. What would be cool? What would be wonderful? What can we do? What can we join? So Woody refocused me quite a bit. Let me tell you a story though. Here's how things go wrong. In the US, there's this huge movement to change church music. I know you're not interested in church music. That's okay. You don't have to be. They're not interested in software. So what happened was a church in California put out a survey. They had noticed that people in their congregation were not singing along with the songs on Sunday morning. And they thought, it seems funny. We're up here as a band. We're trying to play these songs. They're not easy to play. The hymns are sometimes pretty tough. and nobody seems to be enjoying it. Should we even do this? Is this a waste of our time? So they wrote a survey, and they asked everybody, when you don't listen to church music, which, by the way, was a clever piece of permission. If I say, what do you listen to, and you're a churchgoer, you're going to want to say, the church station, right? So they said, when you're not listening to church music, which is all the time, what do you actually listen to? And they filled out the survey, and it turns out that almost everybody in the congregation was listening to soft rock music, rock ballads. The team said, oh, we only have a style problem. They don't hate us. It's not a spiritual problem. They just don't like the tunes. So they started writing their own tunes in a soft rock style. It became very popular. In fact, it spread like wildfire. There's even a Billboard chart for church music, which to me seems fundamentally ridiculous. It's just that there's people out there tracking the top 20. Of course, other churches adopted the music, otherwise it wouldn't have become so popular, to the point of absurdity. Frankly, there are people who don't need to and should not participate in the modern music. This is Gladys. After 50 years as church organist, she decided to embrace the new style. And all over the US, there are congregations who love country music, which I hate with a deep passion. And every Sunday they go to church and they're listening to the California smooth rock stylings of the local church band. And isn't that ridiculous? And that's where we go. Timing is everything, context is everything else. A solution or an answer to a question is tied to a context and a point in time. It's not universal. So XP started with two profound questions. Number one, what has worked well for us in the past? And number two, how can we do these things more intensely? Oh, we used to like unit testing. We found that it was very helpful. How can we do that more intensely? Well, let's write a unit test after every line of code. Oh, that's great. Hey, what's more intense than that? What if we write the unit test first and then write the line of code? Can we get more intense than that? Not really. They couldn't find another way. Getting information back from our salespeople about our customers has always been a good thing. How can we make that more intense? Well, let's bring the customer right into the shop, put them right in the room with us, and we'll work with them every day. That's more intense. Just two questions. From those two questions grew about 12 practices. A huge set of practices that have changed the world significantly among the people who have used them. It's a good idea. So the way this works, though, we didn't know if we could transplant these practices. Turns out we can do it pretty well. It's not too hard. But there's a context. So remember that a question is profound. But without the question, the answer loses its profundity or profoundness. And then, as we copy the unprofound answer from place to place, it can quickly reach a level of ludicrous copycat behaviors and cargo culting, which we heard about this week. Of course, the other thing is the answers are more sellable than the questions. That's why we invented the no copying hashtag. Just kidding. We don't need another silly hashtag. I just thought it was funny. But earlier this week, Toby and Carl and Goiko and others have joked about this week, so I had to get it up on a slide. If you're going to be here, let's get nuts. But airlifting my solution to your problem probably is not a good idea. And it's extra concerning because a lot of consultants in this industry have had a good experience, and they have moved from place to place through the industry trying to recreate the team they used to have. To no avail. They become bitter. Often they fall out of the industry and quit. The worst thing I could do is airlift my solution to your problem. Worse, many executive teams hire the consultants to do exactly that thing because solutions are more sellable than questions. maybe the point isn't the answer. Maybe it was always the question. So let's talk about selling copies for a minute, because this is a little frustrating to me. I go to conference after conference over the course of many years, and what I tend to see is people stand up in front of the room full of people and they say, look how many copies of Agile we've just sold, and see how it's going up year over year? Look, we've sold more Agile this year than ever before. And I thought, well, that's good for you, but how about your poor clients? Have they become Agile? Have they had any improvement in profitability, in serviceability, in how well they handle their customers? Is anybody happy? I don't know, but we're selling a lot. And we have sold the hell out of Agile. And that just scares me. The other thing is that because we're trying to sell a thing, which isn't really a thing, of course we diagram the heck out of it and we put it into flowcharts. Don't try to read the words. That's actually the V model. But I had to find something horrible and ugly that's already been sold. And that's a horrible, ugly thing that has been sold. By the way, I think 5 out of 10 executives believe that Agile is something that happens here. And they could not possibly be more wrong. But they paid the money, they got the copy, they got the cool online tools and everything. They have certifications out the wazoo. Great. Here's the reasons why people say they want to go Agile. This is a recent survey. And there's nothing wrong with these goals, by the way. If I was running it, increase overall productivity, who doesn't want that? These are all admirable goals, right? But can you get there by copying other people's answers? How many of you found that you became a qualified software engineer by copying the answers off of your neighbor's exam? Only 2 admitted it. And they were probably joking. Turns out we don't pick up skills by copying other people's answers. We actually have to do the homework, which is a little disappointing and probably not what you came here to hear, but it's true nonetheless. When we don't actually implement the process, when we don't put out the survey and ask our church what they want to sing, then we run the risk of producing something nobody really wants. Then if they don't want it and it's not useful, if it falls on the bureaucratic silliness side of the line we saw yesterday, then we can only impose it with force. And that's sad. So, hilarity ensues. This is Singh's inevitable compromise. It's an interesting new principle. It was recognized as an observation. If my culture doesn't support the system I'm installing, I will change the system to fit my culture, which is a little backwards or sideways, depending on how you want to squint at it. So let's talk about how we brought the baggage forward. There's a thing called planning stress. And we saw this slide earlier this week. Remember Oslam? She's not here anymore. I think she's gone. I wanted to impress her. So the idea is the longer you have to wait between planning sessions, the more you have to plan. Imagine that you had to plan dinner for 2 people tonight. Not a big deal. Let's say you had to find dinner for 50 people tonight. Not so bad. What if you had to plan dinner for 5 or 6 people for the rest of the year, all of their meals? Oh, that becomes difficult. Well, some of them might be vegetarians, so we have to make sure we have vegetarian options at all times. Some of them may be semi-carnivores, so we need to make sure there's meat at every meal. And some of them may not like Mexican food, so we have to go to Indian. But some of them don't like spicy food, so we'd better get Dutch. That's the least spicy food I know of. And some may not like Chinese, and some may have shellfish allergies. So how much food do you have for each meal? About 8 times more than 10 people can eat. In fact, we did this experiment for 6 guys in a cabin in Oregon, and they spent over $500 US in food, which is basically a family of 6 budget for a month. We threw half the food away. The planning stress was so great that they loaded it up with everything they might possibly want. That's what we see with planning stress. And that is a standard behavior in companies that do not have immediate deliveries and continuous deployment. Planning stress is real. It makes you do bad things. Okay, so let's take that baggage forward. Here's how our releases have always worked before, right? We're in a hurry, we have too much work, so we start working on things, and we realize that we need to fix the build system and refactor the code and change the design and swap out a library for messaging, but we really don't have time. So we don't do those things. We could test, but we don't have enough time. So we defer critical activities. As we approach the release, we hit internal consequences, all the things that go horribly wrong because we haven't taken care of this code. And then we release it and suffer the external consequences. The answer, let's go agile, right? So we install an agile process like Scrum over the top of our existing horrible dysfunctions, and Sing's inevitable avoidance takes place. And it looks something like this. Oh, that's what we're after, right? My problem before was I didn't have enough external issues. It just wasn't enough of internal and external consequences before. Now we fixed that. Well, you know, it happens. What do you expect? This was from this morning. I had to borrow it. It was too good. When we're overloaded, we don't know how to ask the right questions. We're too busy to take care of our code, and we're supposed to know how to retrospect on it. Where's that time going to come from? How are we going to take any changes? How are we going to make any changes? So you just can't bring your baggage forward. It doesn't work well. Add-on agility doesn't work. Here's how it works. Do everything you did before, but this time let's add a few extra features. We're going to add on some agility. So we're going to add meetings so we can get more work done, right? And if we can throw in some staggering work backloads, 8,000 items, that would be great. How about some crushing technical debt, a little mandatory togetherness? That's always a good thing. Let's see how tightly we can crowd people who are working on different things together so they can participate in each other's phone calls. Some commitment abuses and some estimation burden. I use the E word. And of course, really lousy seating arrangements. Now that will solve our problems. In fact, it's so sad that it's come around to this kind of a statement. I thought this was beautiful. He says, my underline's moved. Let me re-underline verbally for you. He says, this is why I hate Agile so vehemently. It's all about estimates and deadlines. Amazing. Couched in nicer terms, story points and commitments, and using psychological manipulation of mandatory consensus. Wow, I would hate that too. If your transition has been like this, let me apologize on the behalf of everybody who isn't an idiot for what has been done to you. Yes, some Agile sucks. Some Agile is absolutely the worst. Compliance Scrum or compliance safe or compliance whatever, where your job is to add on the Agile and comply to the letter of the law, is always going to suck. It cannot have any positive advantages. This is what I meant when I said I wanted to take back Agile. Not from bad people, just from silly practices. I want my questions back. I want us to find out what works for us. That's Martin Fowler. I won't repeat his words, I'm not worthy. But his words echoed from some other words. So, Agile is inherently countercultural. It's about changing how we work together and how we talk together. It sounds like a bunch of hippies on a bus. What, we're going to give these people trust and self-determination? What, we're going to lose control completely? That would be like if you had to sneeze, hiccup, and burp at the same time. Who knows what might come out? Terrifying idea. So, we talk a lot about permission. It turns out that permission is about control. I need to control these people so they don't do something I don't want. We don't really need that. But Permission is a safety mechanism to try to get around misalignment. That's the real problem. So if your problem is misalignment, do you need more governance? Or do you need more communication? Maybe the answer to avoid misalignment is just alignment. I know that's pretty radical. It's countercultural. It's different. Looks like that. But wait, then I have to work with people who are a little different than me. Can you imagine the horrors? Okay, imagine the horrors, but imagine how much we could get done if we did not have to defend against each other. The secret of every great team I've ever seen is that all of their threats are external. If you're in competition or under threat from each other, what you've got is a team that needs help. That's why coaches exist, facilitators, good managers, to work out those kinds of problems. But once we have alignment and we're not defending against each other, every other question can be examined. It opens up the entire world. The role of authority, labor and management relationships, HR policies, everything can be re-examined because now we're all on the same side. That's what we wanted. Agile originally was about all of us being on the same side and getting things done. And not just once. Daily, over and over and over and over and over. So this is what we call the trust transaction. Earlier this week, Vasco talked about this, that when you do what you promise, then people trust you more. And if you don't deliver, then they don't trust you. And if they don't trust you, that's where governance comes from. Have you ever been micromanaged? Don't raise your hands, I know. No human being in this field in 2015 has lived this long without being micromanaged, unless you started programming last year or haven't started yet. So how do I get people to trust me and let me make decisions? Well, I need to make my work visible. And I thought I understood this really well until 4 years ago when I joined Industrial Logic. We're a continuous deployment organization, which means that none of our work can ever be secret or dark. We have to always be visible. At lunch, I counted, and we deployed new software 5 times this morning. If I'm working on it, and my boss doesn't know what I'm working on because I haven't committed, pushed, merged, etc., he doesn't know I'm working. Does he micromanage me? Only when I go dark. As long as my work is visible, he doesn't need to manage me because he can trust me. How long does your work stay dark? Do you have any branches that have been open for more than a week? More than a month? I was in an organization where the average developer had 17 branches. The average age of a branch was 4 months. Those are not branches, my friends, those are forks. Continuous delivery changes everything. So, but it's only possible if we get rid of the baggage and do things in small pieces. And we've had a lot of talk about that, so I don't need to repeat that. We've got story mapping and everything brought up. It's all very possible. And of course, that goes back to the picture. But how do we get productivity with small slices? Well, it turns out that there was a really nice talk earlier about an organization that implemented Scrum without implementing any technical practices, and they got a huge bonus out of it. And I thought that was really cool because I don't hear that story. All the stories I hear about people who actually are making big gains, they're combining XP and Scrum. It turns out you can actually mix and match Agile methods. You just can't mix and match them with non-Agile methods. And there's some statements here. He uses a bad word. Do you see the word up there with the H on it? Hyperproductivity. Do you cringe inside? Does your soul die every time you see that word? Hyperproductivity is the Barbie doll body image for women. Nobody ever has had it, but everybody feels bad because they don't have it, which is just ridiculous. Reality is much more beautiful than such ridiculous toys. Hyperproductivity is a beautiful idea, but I'm not sure that how much realism is in it. But we found that things can change. And there's not just one statement, there's a few of them. And I'm not going to make you read all the words. Just know it's hyperproductivity. Yay, yay. We used XP practices with Scrum. So that gives us something more like this. Now, if you notice, the middle box changed. It's not deferral of activities, it's everything. And of course, the external feedback goes into the next cycle, which goes into the next cycle. When things are small enough, you have trust, you have delivery, the work is visible, it's all great stuff. But that's just doing Agile. How's that taking back Agile? It's only taking back Agile if you've been robbed of it. This is something we can insist on. So these are the things they wanted. Can you see maybe how small slices and strong technical practices and alignment can make a difference here? And can you see how planning meetings and stand-up meetings and retrospectives once a month and delivering to testing eventually is not going to get there? People say they want something, we don't give it to them. Well, that's the bad news. Okay, I didn't come here to be condescending and angry. I can do that at home. I have a teenager. So what I wanted to do is tell you that it didn't die, it's not gone. A lot of people are doing Agile and it keeps growing. There are some very interesting motions in the world. If you go to the Take Back Agile hashtag, you won't see much. If you go to the Take Back Agile Google email group, you probably won't see much. But take a look at these. One of them is, of course, my company, Industrial Logic, because here's the commercial in the middle of the program. You always have one. Who have been working to figure out how to do safe software development. How can I do software in such a way that experiments and failures and changes and broad relational kind of issues can be solved? And we call that safe software development. We've come up with a name for it. Over here it says Onzineering. Onzen is a word that just means safety. And we use the word because it's Japanese and all consultants love Japanese words. But also because if I say the word safety in most US corporations, there has to be legal representation present, because if I say safety, then there could be a lawsuit. So ironically, the word safety is not safe. So it's Onzen. And the way we do this is we have agreements, and we keep our agreements with each other to build the trust. And a lot of those agreements are around how we conduct our practices. We have this thing called a stop work authority card that represents an agreement between us that says if I see you doing something that is unsafe for my customers, unsafe for the code base, unsafe to my colleague, it's not fair to my manager, whatever it is, if I see that you are going to be wasting time and money and possibly injuring us, I flash this card. Our agreement is if I see that red octagon, I will stop what I'm doing and have a conversation about whether that's a good thing to do or not. We have stopped people from doing some very crazy things. One of our developers was sick, and he was on heavy pain medicine, and yet he was putting off a root canal so that he could go out and teach a class 4 time zones away or 8 time zones away. I don't remember what the distance was. Do you really want somebody on codeine trying to teach your class? Does that make any sense to anybody? Well, if you're drugged out of your head on codeine, I guess it makes a lot of sense. And so somebody has to flash a card and say, don't do this stupid thing. There's a conversation. The conversation went like this: please don't do this. You have colleagues who can teach this class and who know what they're doing. Go get your root canal so that you're not in pain anymore before you become a codeine addict, you idiot. And the answer was, okay. Sometimes it's that easy. But sometimes it is, you know what? I feel like you just attacked me. And there's a red octagon, so now we have to stop and talk about it. So this is a token for an agreement that we make in our teams and with our organization. You don't have the same agreement right now, but if you want a card so you can take it home and talk about it, I've got a bunch up here. And it's first come, first serve, and find out what that is. We don't sell that. That's just what we do. There's other things going on too. Of course, XP, oh, hello. Okay, it's not there. Of course, XP and Kanban, and there's also these new lightweight agile methods: open space agility, Tameflow, FAST. I haven't researched them very far, but I understand that their intention is to go back to being lightweight again. And then we have things like sociocracy and holacracy to help us to work as teams together without having to fight through hierarchical relationships that don't work for us. So those are new things that are coming along. Also, hey, there's the no E word. That's a big deal. Between all the activity now in the no estimates world and the book coming out, of course, Vasco gets an advertisement for free. There's also the beyond budgeting that we heard from earlier this week, which is some pretty cool stuff, and I think is going to have some traction as we go forward. And if you thought pair programming was weird and haven't tried it yet, oh, come on. Turns out there are rules. I could teach you the rules. I have blogs about it. I can show you. We can converse in email. It's really easy. The book is great. If you read the book, you don't need to come and talk to me, but you could do it anyway because we like each other. But even cooler than that is mob programming, which is all of the brilliant people all in the same room, all on one computer, all working on the same problem at the same time. It sounds absolutely nuts until you realize that 11/12 of the work you're doing is thinking, not typing. We're not going to optimize for typing. That would be moronic. Oh, yes, we have been doing that for the past 30 years. Well, that's where the questions come from, right? So this grew out of an experiment. I'll show you the video later if you want to. This is huge. It's like, well, what if we didn't build the 60% of features that nobody wants? And that built this whole lean startup idea. Great stuff to learn in there. Expand your reading list if you haven't already done it. Continuous deployment has changed everything. At Industrial Logic, continuous deployment has taken all of the stress out of software development. It's not scary now. I release 10 times a day. If something is wrong, and I didn't spot it when I was running through my desk check, and I didn't spot it when I was pair programming or mob programming with my team, and it does go out, 20 minutes later I can have a fix. It has zero downtime deployment. In fact, most of our people have been using the thing all day long while they were making their 5 releases. Nobody even knows that it changed, unless it was a visible feature. We do it all the time. But it's a whole different set of skills, and it changes the mindset of a programmer. Programmers, testers, it's not a whole lot different. Managers, you'll never know the difference. Programmers, this is fundamental. This is the big stuff. So you know how we want to see all the requirements so we can work out the design and then go as quickly as we can from no code to finished product? You know how we do that? Not anymore. That's dead. It died. Now the question is, okay, given the requirements we have, what's the first piece we can put out and how fast can we get it out? So we may actually take longer to build a feature, intentionally. I'll build a piece of it and release it, build the next piece and release it, build the next piece and release it. I may take 7 to 12 releases to get a whole feature out. Well, Tim, why would you do that? Because the work is visible. It's completely visible, it's completely transparent, and we get feedback immediately. And if we're going to have any integration problems, holding onto the code for a week would cause that. But releasing 7 times a day, there's no integration problems. How many branches do you have, Tim? We have trunk. This is brilliant stuff. It's new. The other things to look at, of course, a lot of work on retrospectives and supporting websites to help your team learn how to solve your problems, answer your questions better. Christopher Avery and responsibility process has become a huge, huge thing. I have learned so much from these people, and you could too. His new book, on the responsibility process, should be coming out probably around Christmas time, if not sooner. I'm on the early review team. It looks great. Do yourself a favor, plan to have this as soon as it comes out, or join the beta program if you can. Great stuff to learn. See, the trick is, everyone says, oh, if people would just take responsibility, this would be so much easier. But you know what? Who's taught you how to take responsibility? Do you know how to do that really? What are the steps for taking responsibility? What does it even mean? Responsibility is the willingness to accept blame when it fails. Well, that's what most people think. It's just not so. So if you want to talk to me about the responsibility process, I'm here all night, I guess. And I've got email, and you can look at that too. And some other interesting stuff. In the history of the world, there have never been so many people who think for a living sitting together in so many places and working. This is the time, evolutionarily, for us to learn how do we think together. And there's some wonderful work being done on that front. This is taking Agile back. And of course, this is by Esther and Don have started this thing, Coaching Beyond the Team, which takes a look at not only how do we make the developers develop better and how do we make the testers test better, but it goes to how can the organization work better? How can we have influence 2 and 3 layers out with the work we're doing? How can we become change agents and be effective? Because that's really what Agile was about to begin with. It affected a huge change in an organization. And the ripples from that have spread all over the place. Sometimes they came via copy and paste process, which is kind of sucky, but we can't doubt the importance. And finally, the open space world, the lean coffees and agile coffees and the unconferences are a huge step forward on how people can learn and think and feel together as human beings. If you have an open space conference, an unconference near you, just sign up now. It's great. You just show up with no agenda. You make it up on the fly. You learn things you didn't know you were interested in. You meet people you didn't know you cared about. And it changes you as a person and improves your life. It doesn't just change the world, it improves the world. And one other plug, Ryan Ripley runs a podcast. And he calls it Agile for Humans, which to me is how it always should have been. You know how they say we have individuals and interactions over processes and tools? That's not a choice of one or the other, by the way. That means that they should agree. But when the tools and processes interfere with the individuals and interactions, then they have to go. All it means is that if there's a conflict, we've chosen the winner. So in his podcast, we talk about how can human beings, real people, in real situations, doing real code, change their workplace? How can we be agile as humans together? Which is a brilliant idea. So Take Back Agile is really about resurrecting the questions. You have to keep questioning. You know, question is a funny word, and if you look at the root of it, you can see there's a journey implied in every question. So, if you want to take back Agile, you don't have to fight anybody. You don't have to hate anything. You don't have to abandon your Scrum certification, right? All you have to do is start a journey together to find what really works for you in your context socially, that gets things really done and hurts nobody. And that's really all I wanted to say today. So, contact information if you want it, and thank you for being here, and I have cards.